right, welcome to WSQ 31. Today we are going to continue in our section on plants, our unit on plants, and we're going to start to discuss today plants without seeds. And basically what we're going to look at in this particular section is the different characteristic or stages of a plant's life cycle. We're going to talk about that real quickly. Then we're going to talk about the characteristics that the three groups of non-vascular plants share. And the characteristics that the three groups of seedless vascular plants share. So we're going to basically classify and categorize non-vascular, which would include those bryophytes, with the also seedless vascular ferns and horsetails and things like that. So let's get to it. One thing I wanted to start with is, I didn't put this in WSQ 30, but I wanted to discuss it at the beginning here, is we need to understand that all plants have a complex life cycle that really includes two different stages. There's what's called the sporophyte stage and the gametophyte stage. And here we have a diagram to help you just see that. The sporophyte stage is the portion of the plant's life cycle in which the plant is producing spores. Okay, so tiny little cells that can ultimately grow into new organisms. Now, we need to understand that spore stage, it's not always spores as we think of spores. It can be confusing because we think of ferns that produce spores. We think of mosses that produce spores. But in the example of more common angiosperms and plants like that, that spore stage would actually be the production of pollens, okay, which would ultimately lead to the gametophyte stage, where egg cells and sperm cells are produced, where fertilization occurs, and you get this cycle between sporophyte and gametophyte stages of the plant. And the only reason why we talk about this at all is I want you to understand that the plant life cycle is more complex and has distinct stages in them, which make it pretty unique. Now, that being said, let's move on and let's talk about the three major groups of non-vascular plants. Non-vascular, if you remember, non-vascular, as we've talked in class, describes plants that do not have a true vascular system. They do not truly have roots, stems, or leaves. And this breaks down really into three major groups. The biggest group and most prevalent one is mosses, and that makes up the vast majority of all of the non-vascular plants fit into the mosses. But we also have these plants called liverworts and another group of plants known as hornworts. So together, these three types of non-vascular plants are the major groupings and all the species that are made up. And let's just quickly talk about each. Mosses are a gametophyte. In the moss gametophyte, it's just a low-growing plant. It has structures that look like roots, structures that look like stems, and structures that look like leaves, but they're not true leaves. They're single-celled instead of the multi-celled structure that you get with true vascular tissue that can go through large distances and spaces. So we'll notice on the right, the gametophyte stage of the moss would be this portion. This is what appears like the leafy part of the plant. The sporophyte stage is the actual stalk-like growth in which they will actually produce the spores that are enclosed in the capsule, and those spores will be released. So that's how mosses and non-vascular plants grow. Liverworts are the second type. There's over 8,000 species of liverworts. They're often found growing on rocks and soil. Again, all non-vascular plants need to be near water because of reproduction. So they'll typically be found in very moist climates and environments. And you can see liverworts get their name because they're kind of liver-shaped foliage, the plants, and they're very flat structures. Hornworts, the last of the groupings of non-vascular, there's fewer than 100 species. These are usually found in moist soil as well, and a lot of times you'll see them mixed with grass plants because of the way they grow and the structure, the design. And so hornworts kind of almost look a little bit more like a grass but just a thicker kind of grass leaf. So pretty interesting, those three structures, and they make up 20,000 species or so. So non-vascular plants are very common, as we learned we watched that film. Peat moss is a form of moss that grows all around the world, very, very prevalent and very common. Now, we also need to talk about what are known as seedless vascular plants. And seedless vascular plants can be broken down into three groups as well. Okay, we have ferns, we have club mosses, and we have horsetails. And what these all share are two characteristics. One, they all have true vascular tissue. So they all have stems, they all have roots, they all have leaves. And two, they do not produce seeds. So if they had vascular tissue and they produce seeds, then we would put them into either an angiosperm or gymnosperm classification. But since they produce by spores, okay, as we see, they release spores, then they fit into this classification as seedless vascular plants. So we can even see in this drawing, this would be examples of ferns. If you've ever seen ferns, ferns have fronds. Their leaves and stems are designed a little bit differently. But those fit into the seedless vascular plants. Ferns specifically, I want to spend a moment on. Ferns make up over 12,000 species of plants are in the fern classification. Most of them have pretty deep underground stems in addition to their roots. And so what makes this really valuable, back in Ohio when I went as a 12-year-old, we went and visited this particular valley full of ferns. And what happens is the ferns, their root systems go underground, and then they have stems that extend underground as well. And so these fern plants can grow massive amounts of area and footage. And what happens is that allows them to grow underground, and then they'll pop up in all kinds of different areas. And so you can have these large fern populations that grow vastly underground, and then their stems and their fronds will pop up out of the soil. So it's an interesting growing pattern in which the stems are underground, the roots are underground, but the leaves or the fronds grow above ground, which gives them a lot of strength. So that is just very quickly, as I told you would be, just a quick overview of non-vascular and seedless vascular plants. And you've watched the WSQ now, so please summarize, answer those questions on Haiku, and I will see you guys later. Bye.